breath of discovery. Welcome to night chemistry, your quiet refuge beneath the stars. Close your eyes and invite a slow, steady breath, the kind that fills the lungs like dawn light filling an empty room. Feel the air drift in, pause, and drift out again, leaving a trace of calm behind. Tonight we journey to 18th century England, where a frail boy named Joseph Priestley peers through rain-streaked windows at ale vats that hiss and fog. Curiosity is his constant companion, wrapping around him like a woolen shawl in the Yorkshire chill. Each strange air, escaping those vats, whispers of hidden worlds, and Joseph listens. As you settle deeper into comfort, imagine parchment rustling in candle glow and the sharp scent of ink. Priestley, now a dissenting scholar, copies notes on theology by day and conjures crackling sparks from primitive batteries by night. Ideas dance before him. Invisible forces, translucent gases, the very spirits of matter. A gentle inhale, a gentle exhale. Our path will glide through the manicured lawns of Bowood House, where an aristocrat's patronage grants Priestley a haven for glassware and dreams. We will pause beside his wooden trough, watch bubbles rise from mercury, and witness the moment he coaxes a colorless gas that lets candles burn brighter and mice breathe longer. Oxygen, the silent gift within every breath you take now. Let tension melt from forehead to shoulders. Soon we will sail with him across an ocean. His convictions smoldering after riotous flames consume his Birmingham laboratory. We will arrive at the Delaware River's edge, where twilight crickets serenade a resilient mind still chasing truth. Another unhurried breath in and out. In the hush of this night, allow Priestley's quest to become your own gentle exploration. Let the story cradle you, each discovery a step further from waking concerns and closer to serene slumber. You are safe, you are breathing, and the next 90 minutes belong to wonder and rest. Now settle in, the journey begins. Settling beneath the Yorkshire night. Ease back and allow darkness to cocoon the room. Let a single steady breath drift in, bloom quietly inside your chest, and slip away again like a sigh across heather moorland. The day's chatter fades to a hush so complete you can almost hear starlight touching slate rooftops. Picture yourself on the edge of the West Riding of Yorkshire in the winter of 1743. Midnight mist lies low along the river air, and chimney smoke clings to the damp air, carrying fragile hints of malt and yeast from a nearby brewery. A modest stone cottage nestles against a hill, its small lead-paned windows flickering with candle glow. Inside, the rough oak floorboards are warm beneath bare feet, warmed by a hearth whose embers pulse faint red. In this quiet refuge a boy of 9 sits upright in bed, propped by patched pillows, lungs whistling faintly with each inhale. His name is Joseph Priestley. Since birth his breathing has been shallow, ribs straining as if the world were stingy with air. Yet his eyes are bright, restless, brilliant. Listen to the wind graze the eaves and the sigh of timber settling. Imagine the boy pressing a parchment-bound notebook to his knees. Many children of the time learn letters only to sign their names, but Joseph is already translating Latin psalms for pleasure. Tonight he sketches strange symbols for heirs. He has heard the village brewer mention. People speak of invisible spirits rising from vats, some that suffocate mice, others that feed flame, and Joseph wants to catch them the way shepherd boys net butterflies on the moor. He shivers, not from cold but from the thrill of questions too large for the cottage walls. Let your shoulders soften. Allow the muscles of your cheeks and jaw to release, as though warm ale was smoothing away every crease of tension. Draw another breath, slow and deep, and imagine it carrying the faint aroma of peat smoke and wet earth. Across a narrow lane, lamplight glints on copper brew kettles. Joseph's uncle and guardian, John Pickard, supervises barrels of fermenting wort that hiss faintly with escaping gas. The townsfolk call those vapors fixed air, believing they weigh upon the chest like a stone if inhaled. Joseph, however, wonders whether each invisible mist is a unique creature, some heavy, some light, perhaps one day harnessed to heal lungs like his. He tears a ragged strip from yesterday's sermon notes to mark the page, sets the notebook aside, and wraps a woolen blanket around his thin shoulders. A quiet tap at the door. Aunt Sarah enters, carrying a cup of heated milk flavored with honey and chamomile. She pauses, noticing ink stains on Joseph's fingers. With maternal patience, she brushes a loose curl from his forehead, then tucks the blanket nearer to his chin. They exchange few words. Yorkshire nights breed an economy of speech. Yet affection blooms in the hush. Sarah's silhouette, outlined by firelight, is a comforting constant in Joseph's fragile world, proof that even great questions can rest safely in tender hands. Feel the warmth of that room spread across your collarbones. Inhale for a count of 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, pause, and release for 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, empty. Each exhalation lifts a sliver of weight from your thoughts, as if invisible airs of worry were venting through an open casement into the fog. Now listen. Tiny clicks echo in the rafters. Perhaps beetles, perhaps the patient tick of time itself. Outside, a church bell strikes one solemn chime. Joseph's eyelids flutter, but the itch of curiosity resists sleep. He slips from bed, bare feet padding to a small desk cluttered with quills, sealing wax, and a treasured copy of Isaac Watts's Logic. He opens the volume at random. Words about clear reasoning and ordered experiment glow in the candle's halo. Watts insists that knowledge is God's invitation to marvel at creation, and tonight Joseph accepts the invitation wholeheartedly. Through the frost-kissed window panes, he spots the brewery yard glistening under lanterns hung for the night watch. Barrels vent curly ribbons of vapor that fade to nothing before reaching the stars. Joseph imagines a glass jar inverted above one barrel, capturing the escaping breath of grain. What would happen if he submerged a lit splinter into that jar? Would the flame choke or blaze? His heart beats quicker, a gentle drum in the quiet cottage. Breathe again slowly. Notice how your ribcage opens like a door, then closes, effortless. The very simplicity of breathing was once a mystery. Still is for those willing to wonder. Joseph returns to bed, but imaginative sparks dance behind his eyes. He envisions building wooden troughs to trap gases underwater, perhaps adding a shelf for candles, a perch for a small mouse. Experiments he will attempt years later, experiments that will shake the foundations of chemical thought. Tonight, though, he is only a boy weaving future brilliance out of present shadows. Across town, a last carriage clatters over cobblestones before the toll gate closes for the night. Horses snort, harness bells jingle, then silence recluses like a book. Snow begins to drift, soft and sound-muffling. Flakes swirl against the window, blurring the cottage lamp into an amber star. The hush grows deeper, and the boy's breathing steadies, though wakefulness still tugs at him like an unsolved puzzle. Imagine yourself walking those silent streets, boots crunching the faint crust of new snow. You pass shuttered bakeries, the blacksmith's forge dark and hands resting until dawn, and the grammar school where Joseph recites Greek irregular verbs better than many masters. You pause before the dissenting meeting house, plain brick, unadorned, yet a beacon for earnest minds excluded from Anglican universities. Inside, benches wait for Sunday prayer, but tonight only echoing quiet fills the nave. Candle smoke ghosts linger in the air, curling toward the rafters like unspoken questions. Your breath joins theirs, rising, swirling, disappearing. Return now to the cottage bedroom. Aunt Sarah has slipped away. The hearth sighs its final breaths of flame. Joseph's head nods forward, and the quill still clutched in his hand leaves a shaky line of ink across the quilt. Slowly he lowers himself to the pillow. His final waking image, a bubble of unseen gas trembling at the lip of a vat, perfect, delicate, radiant in lamplight, then bursting into nothing. Give yourself permission to settle just as he does. Let eyelids fall heavy. Picture the rising bubble, perfect and translucent, as a symbol of each thought you release. It forms, glimmers, releases, and is gone. Another arises, soft, shimmering, departs. One by one the mind's clamor lifts away, leaving stillness. Beyond the cottage, night deepens. The Milky Way arches overhead like spilled chalk across a blackboard. Somewhere in that vastness, oxygen atoms drift, forged in the hearts of ancient stars. Millions of years later they will meet Priestley's flame and your lungs alike. The cosmos is patient. Tonight you share its patience. The hour draws late. Snow thickens on thatched roofs, muffling the world in white. An owl calls from the churchyard you, wings whispering as it sweeps away to hunt over moonlit fields. Inside, the embers crumble to soft ash, faint orange turning to soft gray. Heat radiating in slow, diminishing waves. Joseph's breathing becomes rhythmic, almost musical, an understated counterpoint to the ticking long case clock downstairs. In the timeless hush of sleep, his body mends from the day's frailty while his mind sets questions into careful rows, like seeds ready for spring. He dreams of glass domes and shimmering lights, of candles burning impossibly bright under colorless skies, of answers floating just beyond reach. You two drift closer to the threshold of dreams. Feel the bed, or the chair, or the floor beneath a blanket. Support your limbs completely. There is nowhere else to go, nothing else to do. The story will carry you, gently and unhurried, through decades and across oceans. For now it rests in a quiet Yorkshire bedroom beside a sleeping child and a notebook still open to a half-finished thought. Another slow breath fills your chest. Another easy breath leaves. Notice how naturally the cycle repeats again and again, needing no command. Simple, faithful, life-giving. In the centuries to come, people will name this miracle, parse it into chemistry and physiology. Yet its essence remains a marvel beyond words. Tonight, feel its generosity. In that feeling, allow consciousness to loosen, like a candlewick curling into wax. Details blur, edges soften. The hush inside your skull becomes boundless as moorland fog. If a stray worry tiptoes in, imagine it as drifting vapor, harmless and transient. Let it rise into the rafters and vanish. Replace it with the image of a boy's calm face illuminated by snowfall and embers. Time slows. The heart finds an easy tempo. Distant church bells lose their sharpness, dissolving into the dark. And within this sanctuary of breath and quiet, you and Joseph Priestley rest together, one poised for dreams of discovery, the other already dreaming. Feel warmth at your core, spreading lazily to fingertips, to toes, to the crown of your head. Listen for the soft hiss of snow against glass, the last murmur of a settling log, the whisper of your own pulse in your ears. All sounds weave into a single lullaby. Gentle, steady, ancient as the lungs themselves. Breathe once more with deliberate grace. And pause, and out. Let stillness enfold you like wool and dusk. There is magic in this ordinary act. There is history in every lungful. And in the quiet hours to come, we will trace that magic from Yorkshire mist to glowing glass, from boyhood wonder to scientific revolution. But for this moment you are simply breathing, and that is more than enough. Curious sparks. Dawn hums low across the fog-draped valley, a pearly glow filtering through leaded panes and coloring the cottage walls with the palest rose. You stand on the threshold of a new day in 1749, 6 years after that snow-soft midnight, and Joseph Priestley, now a slender boy of 15, stirs before the rooster even thinks to crow. He slips from bed, lungs drawing fuller draughts of winter air than they once could, and pads toward the brewing yard that has become his private observatory. Outside, everything glistens. Frost feathers the wooden rails, ice pearls hang from copper spigots, and thin steam rises where warm wort meets January chill. Joseph cups his hands before his mouth, exhaling a cloud that mingles with the brewery vapors. He wonders again. if the ghostly plumes from his lungs and the plumes from fermenting barley are relatives, two branches of an unseen family of heirs. From a pocket he draws a stub of graphite and a folded scrap of paper. With brisk strokes he sketches the scene. Vat, vapor, breath. Each line is a prayer to order the invisible. The paper soon bristles with arrows and cramped notes. Questions rather than answers, because questions are Joseph's native tongue. A sudden splash startles him. Uncle Pickard emerges from the mash house. Sleeves rolled, cheeks ruddy with cold and labor. He calls Joseph inside, for the yeast must be skimmed, and Joseph, though hardly a brawny lad, earns his keep by hauling small pails. Together they work in companionable quiet, metal hoops pinging gently as barrels settle. Now and then the boy pauses to watch a bead of foam burst, releasing a wisp of gas that twists like silver ribbon in the slanted morning light. Later, in the cottage kitchen, Aunt Sarah ladles steaming porridge into an earthen bowl. She peppers it with brown sugar saved for Sunday tea. Joseph earned this treat by finishing his Greek declensions the night before. He eats slowly, savoring sweetness and syllables alike. As the spoon clinks, his aunt shares today's plan. The minister at Heckmondwike has agreed to let Joseph attend grammar lessons whenever his health permits. Tuition is a luxury for dissenting families barred from Oxford or Cambridge, but learning is as vital to Joseph as bread to the body. Soon he trudges along the rutted lane, satchel bumping against his hip. Bleak wind reddens his ears. Chalk dust flavors his cough. Yet excitement lifts each step, for the small schoolroom smells of possibilities. Old leather, ink, and the promise of sentences yet to parse. The master, tall and severe, greets him with a curt nod. On the slate board he has written a passage from Cicero about the duties of a good citizen. Joseph copies it, translating word by word, the Latin cadence ringing like distant bells in his mind. As daylight climbs, he devours lessons. Arithmetic that turns hops and barley into predictable ratios, geography that maps the widening world beyond Yorkshire ridges, logic that sharpens his instinctive curiosity into surgical precision. When other boys sneak marbles from their pockets, Joseph sketches crude apparatus in the margins. Bell jars, candles, coiled wires, curious pumps. At midday a thin sun melts the frost, and classes break. Joseph sits alone on a stone wall that overlooks the tumbling air. He unwraps a heel of bread spread with dripping. Between bites he reads from Isaac Watts's Doctrine of the Passions, borrowed overnight from the minister's shelf. The book proposes that reason can master emotion, that clear thinking honors God. Joseph traces the idea across his thoughts. If the Creator gifted humans with breath, surely understanding that breath is sacred work. After lunch, the boys crowd back into the schoolroom, and the master produces an electrostatic machine. 2 brass bells, a crank, a rotating glass globe. He means merely to demonstrate sparks, but to Joseph the clicking will might as well be the axis of the universe. When a violet flash leaps the gap with a sharp snap, the entire class gasps. Joseph doesn't flinch. He leans closer, face aglow, pupils wide as moons, already imagining how an invisible fluid might travel through wires the way unseen gases drift from bubbling wort. Days bleed into months, and Joseph's notebooks swell. One evening, as he copies verbs by hearthlight, a racking cough doubles him over. Aunt Sarah hurries to brew honeyed thyme tea, scolding gently that he works too hard. Yet each spell of weakness only steels his resolve. If his own lungs remain fragile, he will learn the nature of air itself. When illness forces him to stay abed, he reads voraciously. Pliny's Natural History, Boerhaave's Elements of Chemistry, even rare pamphlets by the exuberant American Benjamin Franklin, whose electrical kites embroider the newspapers. Joseph marks paragraphs with crumbs of stale bread, then later transcribes them into commonplace books. His spidery script weaving old knowledge into new hypotheses. Spring arrives on the breath of primroses. The river runs swift with snowmelt, and lambs bleat across mucky fields. One Saturday Joseph walks to Morley, clutching a letter of introduction to Reverend George Hagerstone, a dissenting minister rumored to possess a small collection of scientific instruments. Reverend Hagerstone, a round man with spectacles that fog at every temperature change, ushers him into a cluttered parlor. Shelves bow under chemical flasks, Leyden jars, fossil shells, and volumes bound in cracked calfskin. Hagerstone invites the boy to build a pantograph for copying diagrams, then demonstrates a crude air pump. As the glass dome empties, a candle flame gutters to a bluish bead, then expires. Joseph's breath catches in wonder. He observes how the candle's demise mirrors the suffocation of a mouse placed under the same dome in Franklin's essays. The Reverend muses, "We do but grope at the edges, lad. One day someone will find out what these airs truly are." In that moment a private vow seals inside Joseph's chest, like the vacuum under the glass. He will be that someone. By 18, Joseph's Latin is fluent, his Greek serviceable, his Hebrew adequate, and his appetite for knowledge insatiable. Yet formal university remains barred to him because he refuses the Anglican 39 Articles. Instead, friends arrange tuition at the Dissenting Academy in Daventry, far to the south. Before departure he spends a final summer roaming Yorkshire hills, filling lungs with heather-scented wind, recording bird calls, and observing how fog pools in valleys at dawn. He notes patterns. Cold air sinks, warm air rises. Invisible laws govern even the sky. On the eve of his journey, the village gathers in the meeting house for a farewell sermon. Oil lamps flicker against whitewashed walls. Joseph kneels as elders lay hands upon his shoulders, blessing his studies and praying for his delicate constitution. He stands, voice surprisingly steady, and recites from Psalm 104. "Thou sendest forth thy Spirit, they are created, and thou renewest the face of the earth." The congregation hears scripture. Joseph hears a riddle of air and spirit begging to be solved. At dawn, a horse-drawn coach rattles toward Daventry, carrying trunk, books, and a heart brimming with possibility. Fields blur, hedgerows flick by, and Joseph reflects on everything Yorkshire has taught him. That fermentation births deadly but fascinating vapors, that static sparks can leap unseen chasms, that restricted lungs need not restrict imagination. Each mile south feels like a page turning toward a chapter wreathed in glassware and discovery. The academy greets him with modest dormitories and a library large enough to make his pulse quicken. Tutors encourage free inquiry. Here he debates Calvinist doctrine 1 hour and studies natural philosophy the next. He constructs a small orrery, lectures classmates on meteorology, and begins recording barometric pressure alongside daily journal entries. When an electrical demonstration leaves a classmate's hair standing on end, Joseph laughs harder than he has in years, exhilarated by proof that the unseen can be coaxed into spectacle. Still, money is scarce. He tutors younger students, trades translations for candles, writes sermons for country chapels on Sundays. His voice, once reedy, gains resonance. Congregants remark that he sounds older than his years, a minister in the making. Yet every homily about divine breath loops back to scientific wondering. He orders glass tubing, mercury, and iron filings from a Birmingham supplier, paying with saved shillings. His cramped attic soon smells of metal and lamp oil, a poor man's laboratory where dreams distill night after night. One evening lightning splits the sky over Daventry, brilliant and immediate. Joseph flings open his window to taste the charged air on his tongue. Ozone pricks his nostrils, and he scribbles frantic impressions on damp paper. The storm seems to change the air, jolting it into a sharper flavor. Could gases themselves transform? Might electricity be an agent of change, rewriting the very script of the atmosphere? He resolves to experiment, but first he steadies his thoughts with a practiced slow breath. in pulled out, and the simple act reminds him that life's most profound processes are quiet, rhythmic, easily overlooked. Months turn to years. When illness strikes again, academy physicians bleed him per custom, leaving him weak and pale. In convalescence, he studies the writings of Robert Boyle, who argued for experimental rigor, and Stephen Hales, who collected plant breath in inverted flasks. Priestley sees himself as heir to their unfinished questions. At 20, recovering strength, he delivers a lecture series on the mechanical arts, describing pumps, presses, and mills with such clarity that townsfolk crowd the chapel just to hear technology made wondrous. His reputation spreads. Soon letters arrive from provincial ministers asking for copies of his notes. He obliges, hand-stitching pamphlets late into the night. Between pages, candle smoke spirals upward, reminding him again of unseen currents linking earth to heaven. When term ends, Joseph returns to Yorkshire for a brief visit. The brewery smells the same: sweet mash, tang of barrel hoops, winter damp. He walks among the vats like an old friend among giants, noting with fresh eyes how fermentation warms the liquid, how warmth quickens the release of gas. He remembers his boyhood sketches, refines them with Daventry geometry, and imagines a proper apparatus. A trough of water, glass jars inverted, gas captured, measured, compared. The idea thrums through him like a held chord. Before leaving home again, he kneels by the river at dusk, watching mist writhe above the surface. Each ribbon of vapor is a promise. There is more to air than emptiness. He dips a hand into the cold current, letting water sheath his fingers. Someday, he muses, he will understand the kinship between the river's flow and the restless motion of gases. The same dance, merely slower or faster. He stands, breathes deep, pockets a smooth pebble as talisman, and turns south once more, toward Leeds, Townley, Bowood, and beyond. The road ahead coils through parishes, laboratories, revolutions, and continents, but its first true mile began here, on Yorkshire soil, with a frail child asking why invisible things matter. And as Joseph's silhouette recedes into twilight, you too feel the pull of inquiry tugging at the edges of thought. Yet there is no urgency, only a gentle promise that answers will unfold in unhurried time. Let shoulders slacken, let eyelids drift half closed. Imagine your mind as that Yorkshire river, surface calm, depths moving in serene, steady currents. Questions may ripple, but they carry you forward at a pace perfectly suited for rest. A final breath whispers through you. Quiet, constant, miraculous. The journey continues, but for this moment, simply float upon the wonder of invisible airs, confident that discovery waits just beyond the horizon of sleep. Enlightenment embers. Carriages of thought roll southward through time, carrying Joseph Priestley from the green folds of Yorkshire into the broader throes of England's mid-century awakening. Imagine the year 1755. Roads rutted yet buzzing with rumor, printing presses clattering like distant thunder, and everywhere the crackle of new ideas leaping between minds as surely as sparks leap a conductor's gap. Daventry Academy, though modest in bricks and budget, stands at the very heart of this electric age of reason. Its dormers rise above a garden of winter cabbages and holly, and its library windows glow deep amber at night, alive with lamplight and debate. Push open the heavy oaken door, and the scent of tallow candles mingles with ink and the faint mustiness of vellum. Priestley, now 22 and finishing his course of study, has made these halls his crucible. Here belief collides with empiricism, and each collision forges a brighter, sharper intellect. Step into the common room on a windy March evening. A fire pops gently in the grate, warding off the chill that seeps through stone. Around a scarred walnut table, students trade questions like precious coins. One argues Locke's theory of the mind as tabula rasa, another counters with Calvin's doctrine of innate depravity. Joseph listens first, eyes flitting from face to face, then interjects with measured certainty that rests on observation, not assumption. If children are born corrupt, he muses, why does every infant reach for light? The room falls thoughtful. He is not simply challenging theology. He is inviting experiment, even into the realm of the soul. Many nights unfold in this fashion, debates stretching long after embers gray. At their close, Priestley returns to his attic cell, where a small window frames the moon and a makeshift shelf groans under second-hand instruments. A Leyden jar that hums with stored lightning, a battered air pump whose leather valves wheeze softly, coils of brass wire that tangle like sleeping snakes. Beneath the window sits an unfinished essay titled Matters Electric and Moral, in which Joseph marvels at how unseen forces might shape both nature and conscience. He writes until quill scratches blur into dawn birdsong, then douses the lamp and rests his head, yet dreams remain vivid with images of sparks tracing invisible paths across the void. Spring quickens. Cherry buds swell outside the academy, and Joseph's final examinations draw near. He passes them easily, distinguishable not by rote memory but by the clarity of his reasoning. When tutors confer about his future, they agree he is rare, both a gifted preacher and a born natural philosopher. In recognition, the Academy grants him an informal license to teach grammar and rhetoric to first-year pupils while awaiting a pastoral posting. He accepts, grateful for the income but more grateful for continued access to the library's trove. Now drift through those shelves as he does each afternoon. Leather spines whisper names that will become his lifelong companions: Boyle, Newton, Hooke, Boerhaave, and, most exhilarating, Benjamin Franklin, whose treatise on electricity has just crossed the Atlantic in a packet ship's hold. Joseph studies Franklin's accounts of storm clouds as vast capacitors and of lightning rods courting heaven's fire. The prose crackles against his imagination. He copies passages longhand, then sets about replicating small experiments in a disused storeroom that smells of chalk and linseed oil. Envision that storeroom. A pane of violet glass stands propped in a vise. Priestley rubs it with a silk cloth until hair on his wrist rises. He brings a knuckle close. Snap, a blue needle of light jumps to his skin. He laughs softly, the sound half wonder, half reverence. With each test he takes meticulous notes: length of spark, dryness of air, frequency of discharge. He charts them hourly, discovering that humidity dampens electricity's ardor, and that sharper points draw stronger sparks than blunt rods. These observations, humble though they seem, will later inform Franklin himself, for Joseph will write to the American sage, and Franklin will answer. But first comes a decisive turn. A small congregation in Needham Market desires a minister. They can offer modest pay and a parsonage set among apple orchards. In late summer, Priestley accepts the call, packs his books and barometer, and journeys across fields dappled gold by ripening wheat. Needham greets him with quiet lanes, thatched roofs, and parishioners eager for sermons that stir both heart and intellect. On Joseph's inaugural Sunday, the chapel fills with the scent of lavender sprigs tucked into prayer books. He ascends the narrow pulpit, notes tremble slightly in hand, and begins. His voice is still soft but carries an earnest timbre that draws listeners nearer. He speaks of moral improvement not as fearful obedience but as enlightened choice. Truth, he preaches, is the breath of God's universe. When we inhale it freely, conscience expands. The congregation leans forward, newly attentive to words that marry scripture and sensibility. Week by week, Needham warms to their young minister. He teaches children letters in the vestry, organizes evening lectures on astronomy in a barn loft, and, crucially, continues his electrical experiments in a shed behind the parsonage. Candlelight spills from the door some nights past midnight, revealing a tangle of wires strung between beer bottles turned Leyden jars. Local farmers chuckle that the preacher is milking thunder, yet soon they find themselves invited to witness small marvels: sparks lighting a strip of linen, flakes of gold leaf dancing in an invisible breeze, the flaring brilliance when a dusting of flour meets a charged spoon. Ore replaces mirth. Priestley's shed becomes a village salon of science. 2 years pass. He publishes his first pamphlet, The Doctrine of Phlogiston Briefly Considered, printing it on credit with a Norwich press. Though reads are few and profits nil, the thrill of seeing his name in type is reward enough. He sends copies to correspondents from Daventry and dares to post one across the ocean to Franklin. Months later, a battered envelope returns, its red wax seal broken from rough handling. Inside, Franklin's hand commends Priestley's clear prose and invites further exchange. Joseph's pulse quickens. This is connection, a filament stretching between continents, conducting not electrons but ideas. Opportunity arrives again, this time through friendship. A parson named Theophilus Lindsay invites Priestley to take charge of a new school in Nantwich, where dissenters lack quality education for their children. Nantwich lies closer to industrial Birmingham and its circle of experimenters. Joseph, restless for broader horizons, accepts. He walks the 50-odd miles north on frosty roads, his breath puffing into the grey dawn, luggage rumbling behind in a hired cart. Nantwich schoolhouse opens in the former home of a maltster. Joseph scrubs floors, erects chalkboards, and designs a curriculum that marries classics to practical arts. Pupils learn Latin verbs in the morning and the mechanics of pulleys by afternoon. Community notice spreads. Enrollment triples within a term. Yet even as he teaches, Priestley conducts nightly inquiries into the character of electricity and air. He invents a rotating electrical whirl that fascinates students, a disc that spins when charged, illustrating how force can convert to motion, an echo of industrial machines beginning to transform England. Life in Nantwich might have continued comfortably, but for a letter that arrives one crisp October morning. Sir Thomas Cavendish, patron of Leeds' New Mill Hill Chapel, seeks a tutor for his children and a part-time minister for the city's dissenting congregation. The position promises not only higher income but access to the intellectual ferment of a bustling commercial center. Leeds boasts printers, instrument makers, and philosophical societies hungry for lectures. Priestley debates for one day, prays for another, then prepares once more to move. Picture his arrival. Leeds clothed in coal soot, chimneys shouldering into a lowering sky, and the river Aire, same name yet broader, slipping through mill wheels. The air itself tastes metallic, laced with fumes from dye works and tanneries. To many it is unpleasant. To Priestley it is fascinating, a living textbook of atmospheres in flux. He sets up residence on Meadow Lane, greets the Cavendish household, and quickly establishes a routine. Teaching mornings, sermon craft by early afternoon, experimental work late into the evening. One night he clambers to the chapel attic, lantern in hand, searching for a quiet place to house his apparatus. Amid rafters he discovers discarded organ pipes and dusty hymnals, plenty of room for a small laboratory. Within weeks the attic hosts glass retorts, jars of cobalt, and a peculiar trough he fashions from pine, coated in beeswax to hold water without leaking. Here, above pews where faithful gather each Sunday, he will embark on the research that makes his name endure. Pause and breathe in that attic stillness with him. Rain drums lightly on the slate roof. Somewhere below, a watchman's bell marks the top of the hour. Priestley lowers a copper loop into his wax trough, submerges an inverted glass jar, and slips a burning splinter beneath the rim. Bubbles fountain upward, carbonic, nitric, he cannot yet say. But in journals he drafts a promise to identify, categorize, and perhaps even improve these airs for the benefit of medicine and manufacture. By day he walks Leeds streets, noting how smoke from chimneys plumes differently in damp weather versus dry. He converses with dyers who use acid vapors to fix color, and with brewers whose fermenting yeast yields intoxicating fogs. Every observation funnels into a grand scheme, a catalogue of the atmosphere's many species, each to be captured, tested, and named. During this period, Priestley publishes a chart of biography and a chart of history, wall-sized timelines that hang in schools across England, turning the abstract march of centuries into visual order. The public lauds his ingenuity. He modestly credits only his love of knowledge arrangement, a trait as natural to him as breathing. Year follows fruitful year. Electrical experiments give way to pneumatic chemistry. Sermons grow simultaneously more radical, urging reason and tolerance. Some congregants bristle, yet many young minds ignite. Meanwhile, letters from Franklin continue, now joined by notes from the Scottish physician William Watson and from members of the nascent Lunar Society in Birmingham. Each correspondent forms another strand in an expanding web of enlightenment, filaments alive with possibility. Night after night, Priestley returns to his attic, lights a candle, records barometric pressure, and sets about coaxing secrets from invisible worlds. One evening he sprinkles powdered sulfur onto hot iron within his submerged jar and watches yellow fumes swirl like captive dragons. He notices that a candle flame, once brilliant, dims more quickly in these vapors than in common air. He labels the observation, sketches the apparatus, and wonders whether these properties might explain choking mill workers and miners gasping far below ground. Outside the city rests. Horses stamp in dark stables, mill wheels slowed to stasis. Only a solitary lamplighter steps through puddles, his torch flicking arcs of orange across wet cobblestone. Overhead, clouds part to reveal a spill of stars, old light traveling ages to reach a young man crouched over bubbling retorts. In that quiet, Priestley sets down his quill, flexes aching fingers, and allows a single deep breath to fill him with humility and resolve. Air may be multifarious, but its giver is one. Understanding creation, he believes, honors the Creator. Let your own breath echo his. Slow, deliberate, full. Feel the rib cage widen like shutters opening onto knowledge. Then exhale, releasing tension like unseen vapor rising into the rafters. In this shared stillness you can almost hear ink drying, almost feel a faint static prickle at your fingertips, a reminder that discovery begins in curiosity and ends in illumination. Priestley snuffs the candle, darkness blooms, and the attic becomes a womb of possibility. Tomorrow he will return to his trough, refine measurements, and perhaps glimpse a sliver of truth no one has yet seen. But tonight, this gentle present night, belongs to rest. Let eyelids grow heavy. Let thoughts settle like papers beneath a polished glass weight. The story continues downstream. For now, float within the hush where sparks sleep, inventions gestate, and the air itself waits to be revealed. Leeds experiments. Night drapes itself over Leeds like a velvet mantle stitched with faint coal smoke and the low tremble of mill wheels winding down. Above Mill Hill Chapel the attic window flickers alive. Joseph Priestley has lit the first lamp of evening. Its warm glow spills into rafters thick with hymnal dust and illuminates a curious scene. Rows of glass jars inverted in a wooden trough of water, a wax-sealed plank beneath to keep leakage at bay, slender tubes coiled like translucent serpents, and a notebook already sprouting fresh ink. This narrow, slanted room, no wider than a choir stall, is about to become the birthplace of pneumatic chemistry. Settle your shoulders and match his quiet anticipation with a slow inhale, as though drawing the very lamplight into your lungs. Hold for a beat, then let it escape, soft as mist curling from a kettle. Earlier in the day, Priestley visited a local brewery to observe vats trembling with fermentation. The master brewer, apron dusted in barley flakes, joked that the minister cared more for invisible spirits than for the ale itself. Joseph merely smiled, eyes following each bubble that burst atop the froth, tiny spheres of fixed air, carbonic gas that leaves candles gasping and suffocates mice. Now, back in his attic, he intends to capture that unseen effervescence and coax it to reveal its secrets. He lowers a brass ladle filled with fresh fermenting liquor into the trough's water. Brown foam trickles upward. Bubbles gather under the submerged jar until an elastic dome of gas displaces the water entirely. The transformation feels almost sacramental, liquid becoming vapor, substance turning into concept. He slides a glass plate over the jar's mouth, flips it upright, and removes the ladle. The captive gas wavers, silver gray, waiting. A lit splinter grazes the rim and instantly dies, proof that life cannot flourish in this heavy air. Joseph records the observation with crisp strokes, his script spilling steady across the page despite the cramped table. Pause and breathe again. Inhale 4 counts, exhale 6, mirroring the slow exodus of ordinary air from beneath that jar. Curiosity will not let him rest at fixed air alone. He next places a fragment of calcined alabaster, a form of gypsum, into a shallow porcelain dish atop the trough shelf. Drips of sulfuric acid hiss upon contact, releasing a fresher gas that rushes to fill another inverted jar. When he touches a flame to this sample, the splinter burns brighter than normal, urgent and vigorous, as though the gas itself were feeding a hidden hunger in the wood. Priestley's pulse leaps. Something here promotes combustion, something opposite of the suffocating air from beer vats. He calls it nitrous air, a provisional name borrowed from the works of Hales. Later he will refine that terminology, but tonight he simply marvels. Outside, the city clock tolls 8, its deep iron voice vibrating through brick walls and into Priestley's bones. Footsteps scuff cobblestones below as mill workers trudge home. Their exhalations, visible in the chill, are mixtures of the very airs he is sorting, some nourishing, some spent. Joseph imagines labeling each plume above a worker's head. Common air, phlogisticated air, dephlogisticated air still to be found. A small wry smile touches his lips at that final blank. The unknown beckons like a star glimpsed between chimney stacks. He leans back, closes his eyes, and lets fatigue melt away on a measured breath. In stillness he recalls a conversation from midday with a dyer who set wool by dipping it into vats steeped in volatile acid fumes. Those vapors, the dyer complained, stole breath and corroded copper hooks. Priestley had inhaled cautiously, noting an acrid tang that lanced the sinuses. Another puzzle piece. He files the memory away for future experiment, certain that each trade of leads is an unwitting laboratory, every craft releasing its own signature air. Returning focus to the attic, he raises a thin glass tube and slips one end beneath the rim of the first jar. His lips gently draw a sample through water into the tube. His tongue tasting bitterness tells him he's succeeded. But direct inhalation is dangerous. So he lets the gas bubble over a violet dye solution in a second vessel. The vibrant purple fades to colorless within seconds. Fixed air, he concludes, must possess an acid quality. He jots the result, underline neat, then sketches the apparatus so precisely one could rebuild it from memory alone. For a moment he lifts the window sash. Cool night air sweeps in, nudging the flame and sending shadows scuttling over rafters. From this height he can hear hooves clop distant bridges, can smell tanneries steeping hides in lime, can almost taste soot drifting from chimneys. He sighs, long, slow content. Each sense impression is more evidence, more data. He has come to see the world as a grand retort, distilling truths to be gathered by patient souls. Another deep breath in, hold, release. Feel tranquility settle like dust on old hymnals. Next he turns experimental ambition toward artificial mineral water. At Bowood House years later he will perfect it, but the seed sprouts here. He fills a bladder with fixed air drawn from beer yeast, ties it tight with twine, and forces the gas through cool spring water, shaking the flask until it fizzles audibly. Moments later he sips. Sharp, refreshing, almost metallic. His lips tingle. Perhaps such water could soothe scurvy at sea, he muses, or ease stomach ailments in mills where laborers toil among fumes. He notates taste, effervescence, and a whimsical remark. Pleasant to drink, may be healthful. Before closing the notebook, he drafts a quick sketch of a potential dispensing apparatus. Pewter tank, valve spigot, interchangeable bladders, a design that centuries hence will echo in every soda siphon clinking in cafes. Then, with deliberate calm, he lays quill aside, straightens spine, and performs a silent 10-count breathing exercise he has adopted to steady nerves after long hours bent over mercury. Downstairs, the chapel caretaker clinks keys, securing doors for the night. A soft echo climbs the stairwell. Joseph quenches his candle and allows only the lamp by the trough to glow, a single centered star guiding thought. He withdraws a sliver of red-hot charcoal with tongs and introduces it beneath a fresh jar of unknown gas produced by heating saltpeter over a flame. The coal does not extinguish. Instead it flares white-hot, tracing fierce spirals of sparks before subsiding. Another note: air supportive of ignition but distinct in odor, perhaps a cousin to common air yet richer. The breadth of the atmospheric family is widening before his eyes. Hours pass upon hours. Ink dries glossy, then turns matte as lamplight shifts. Priestley's cramped shoulders relax only when he stretches, cracks the attic door, and descends the narrow stair to fetch a mug of warm milk from the caretaker's stove. In the corridor he pauses by chapel windows, regarding the silent pews dimly lit by street lamps outside. He thinks of tomorrow's sermon, of how the congregants will sit among those pews and breathe ordinary air entirely unaware of its complexity. Should he tell them? Perhaps in gentle metaphor. He will speak of how God shelters countless mysteries within the simplest gifts, how what seems empty can teem with invisible bounty. Milk finished, he returns upstairs. A cold draft follows, fluttering the pages of his journal until they settle open at a blank leaf. He regards the space like fresh snow awaiting footsteps. On impulse he begins a chart. 2 axes intersecting. One labels airs that extinguish flame, the other airs that revive flame. Into quadrants he plots each specimen collected so far. Fixed air sits low left, deadly extinguishing. Common air occupies the center. Nitrous air hovers nearer revival. There is room, he senses, for another quadrant far to the upper right, a space begging to be filled by an air that invigorates life beyond measure. The idea tingles along his skin, though he cannot yet name it. You might imagine reaching out to the parchment, placing a fingertip in that empty quadrant, feeling possibility dawn beneath the paper. Let the notion warm you, then exhale tension away. Midnight nears. The city beyond the roofline sinks into hush. Only the air river murmurs against its embankments. Priestley cleans glassware meticulously, mindful of residues that could confound tomorrow's trials. He rinses tubes, wipes copper loops, stoppers jars with greased corks. Each careful gesture becomes meditative, a rhythm of order after hours of chaotic questioning. Finally he caps the ink, blots the last line. Further inquiry required on airs from nitrate earths, and closes the notebook with a soft thud. Extinguishing the lamp, he stands in darkness lit only by moon pools sliding through rafters. The room smells faintly of sulfur, malt, and adventure. He breathes slow and deep, savoring the night as both cathedral and classroom. As you listen to that breath, yours and his weaving together across centuries, allow eyelids to droop. Feel your body loosen, like a glass jar releasing water to make room for a lighter atmosphere within. Nothing presses upon you now. Heaviness lifts. Around you, the hush of sleeping streets, the peace of completed work, the soft promise that tomorrow fresh questions will spark anew. Priestley descends a final staircase to his modest room, curls beneath a wool blanket still scented of lanolin, and drifts almost instantly into dream. Lamps gutter out one by one across leads until the city lies under a quilt of starlight. Somewhere in that silent sky, atoms of what he will one day call oxygen scatter, waiting patiently for discovery. They float above mills, over chapels, through rafters, and into your thoughts as gentle lullabies of possibility. Let a last easy breath flow. Imagine each exhale carrying spent air into the world. Imagine each inhale returning charged with unseen vitality. In this rhythmic exchange you share kinship with every spark in Priestley's attic, every bubble in his trough, every glinting idea in notebooks yet to come. Rest in that kinship. The story will resume when the lamp is lit anew. For now, you may simply breathe and dream alongside the man who is learning to give names to the silence between heartbeats. Bowood House. Wiltshire unfolds beneath a pale April sun, its rolling downs quilted in early green wheat and hedgerows starred with blackthorn blossom. A carriage rattles along the Bath Road, axle softly whining, as Joseph Priestley gazes out the window and lets the countryside ripple across his thoughts like a calm mind across a still pond. Ahead rises Bowood House, seat of William Petty Fitzmaurice, the Earl of Shelburne, a Palladian mansion poised above terraced lawns and mirrored lakes. The invitation to tutor the Earl's two boys, and to pursue scientific inquiry without want, has felt to Priestley like a door swinging open in his very chest. The carriage turns through wrought iron gates. Gravel crunches under wheel. Peacocks lift their emerald trains and regard the arrival with mild disdain. As the horses slow, Priestley draws a measured breath. Quiet, steady, 4 beats in, 6 beats out, allowing anticipation to settle into poised gratitude. Footmen in buff livery open the door. The vast entrance hall, brimmed with marbled light, smells faintly of beeswax and cut hyacinth. A chiming clock marks the hour, but time here already feels roomy, elastic, generous. Days pass. He wakes to the soft percussion of doves on the cornice, breakfasts on oatcakes beside tall windows, and then leads young William and Henry through lessons in Latin verse, geography, and moral philosophy. The boys are eager, bright, quick to laughter. Their mother, Lady Louisa, insists that curiosity be fed like a delicate hothouse plant, and Priestley, whose own childhood hungered for such nurture, obliges with stories of electricity leaping like foxfire, of vapors that hide inside plants, of stars so distant their light is a form of memory. Afternoons belong to inquiry. The Earl has granted him 2 adjoining rooms in the northwest wing, one a library lined with calf-bound volumes, the other a private laboratory looking onto gardens landscaped by Capability Brown. Priestley walks the tiled corridor between them like a bee shuttling nectar. Ideas gathered among books crystallize into experiments amid glass and flame. Picture that library. Parquet floor glowing with honeyed sheen, a domed ceiling painted with soft trompe-l'oeil clouds, and shelves that climb high as hope. There rests a folio of Lavoisier freshly arrived from Paris, a first edition of Newton's Optics, and, to Priestley's delight, several treatises on pneumatic medicine. He runs a reverent finger along their spines, feels the slight give of leather, inhales the musk of paper browned at the edges, aromas as intoxicating to him as garden lilac. Each book seems to breathe. Each breath invites response. Now cross to the laboratory. Broad sash windows are flung wide, letting spring air mingle with sharper notes of sulfur and spirit. A high work table hosts brass retorts, a polished air pump, stoppered phials of nitric acid. Along one wall stands the familiar wooden pneumatic trough, newly reconstructed by estate carpenters of seasoned oak sealed with brewer's pitch. Sunlight pools on the water's surface, dappling upward onto the whitewashed ceiling. It is a tranquil workshop. No soot-caked mill roof, no leads din, yet the silence hums with possibilities. Breathe in that hush, slow and fearless. Breathe out whatever restlessness still clings like coal dust to the cuffs of memory. The Earl himself is an inquisitive soul. After dinner he invites Priestley to walk the serpentine lake where swans trace languid figurates through lilied coves. Their conversation roams, from liberty of conscience to the price of alum to whether trees respire at night. Shelburne's Newfoundland hounds pad ahead, brushing reeds grown tall with recent rain. Under an opal dusk, the two men pause on a footbridge. Bats flicker overhead, stitching the air with invisible thread. Shelburne asks, almost shyly, what discovery Priestley most hopes to make. Joseph answers without flourish, to know the life that lives within air itself, and perhaps, my lord, to free mankind a little further from ignorance. The Earl smiles, touches the iron railing, and promises continued patronage so long as lungs draw breath and curiosity carries them both forward. Back in the laboratory, candle flames lean toward open windows as if eavesdropping on the nightingale hidden in yew branches below. Priestley sets a porcelain crucible atop a sheet of red mercury oxide, what apothecaries call red calx of mercury, intent on heating it to bright orange. But first he readies his glassware, a stout retort necked into a bent tube leading beneath one of the inverted jars in his trough. Every joint he smears with beeswax lard paste to guard against leakage. While hands work, mind drifts across questions charted in his notebook. Why do mice recover in certain airs yet sicken in others? Why does nitrous vapor brighten flame only briefly? Might there exist an air yet purer, more vital, waiting to be coaxed from common substances by simple fire? These thoughts settle inside him like embers banking for a larger blaze. He pauses, rolls shoulders, and lets a cleansing breath unfurl from diaphragm to collarbone. The gesture is small, nearly invisible, but it threads calm through his body with the certainty of ritual. When the crucible glows, dull brick-red light spills over retort glass, and a faint, colorless gas begins to issue through the tube, bubbling into water. He caps the jar once filled, labels it only with the date, and moves on. There will be time to test its properties tomorrow. Another jar receives gas from heated sal ammoniac, yet another from calcined magnesia. Rows mount like silent organ pipes, each containing a note yet unheard. Morning finds him beneath pleached lime trees, tutoring the boys in Euclid. A breeze shivers leaves into silver. Pollen drifts, soft as sighs. William misconstrues the Pythagorean proof. Patiently, Priestley sketches right triangles in damp soil, explaining that the square of the hypotenuse equals the sum of the squares on the other two sides. As he finishes, he notices how easily breath moves through his chest, how air here seems sweeter than in coal-smitten Leeds. A whimsical speculation arises. Perhaps country atmosphere holds more of that unknown invigorating principle he seeks. He resolves to compare jars filled within the house grounds to those filled at the foundry in Conn Village. Soon a pattern emerges. Early lessons, midday experiments, twilight walks. The rhythm suits him. His constitution strengthens. He sleeps beneath a tester bed whose white curtains billow gently with nocturnal drafts, dreams untroubled but vivid. Glass spheres spinning like planets, flames blooming underwater, unknown letters spelling themselves across sky. One afternoon he carries a small barometer into the kitchen garden where gardeners stake sweet peas. Barometric pressure falls as a warm front slides over the estate, and Priestley notes how his breathing feels even easier. He wonders aloud whether meteorological changes alter the composition of air. The head gardener, Mr. Talbot, nods politely, not fully understanding but pleased nonetheless to assist. Together they erect a simple weather station near the apiary, thermometer, barometer, hygrometer, and agree to log readings twice daily. Science seeps into every corner of Bowood life, gentle and infectious as birdsong. Within the library one rainy evening, Priestley discovers a French pamphlet speculating that plants might purify foul air. He recalls a jar in which he had placed a sprig of mint after a candle's flame failed. Days later the candle rekindled easily, though he had assumed error. Could it be that the mint exhaled something restorative? His pulse quickens. This line of thought could marry botany and pneumatics, revealing a grand cycle of air and life. He copies the pamphlet's key passages, margin notes ringing with exclamation points. That night he repeats the experiment. Into a jar of spent air he slips a fresh sprig of spearmint, seals it, and sets it on a sun-warmed sill in the laboratory. In a separate dark closeted jar, he traps another sprig. Days later he tests both with candles. The one that bathed in sunlight burns brightly. The one kept in darkness barely flickers. Revelation unfurls inside him. Light and greenery collaborate to renew the atmosphere. He baptizes the phenomenon vegetation restoring air, a phrase that will soon evolve into photosynthesis on other tongues. Breathe with him in that moment of understanding. Draw in a lungful as though it too has been freshly minted by leaves under sun. Feel its cool clarity branch through your chest like sap through xylem. Then release, gentle as petals settling on water. Letters fly from Bowood, to Benjamin Franklin in Philadelphia, to Sir John Pringle of the Royal Society, to Dutch savant Jan Ingenhouse. Each envelope bears neat lines describing restorative plant air, inflammable airs, acid airs. Replies come thick with encouragement. Shelf by shelf, the Bowood Library becomes a living conversation, pages rustling like whispering colleagues. Summer deepens. Roses bow heavy with scent. On Midsummer Eve, fireworks burst over the ornamental lake to celebrate the Earl's political triumph in Westminster. Priestley stands among guests on the terrace, watching green and gold chrysanthemums of flame bloom against velvet night. Smoke drifts over lawns, curling around him in sweet salt spirals, and he notes instinctively how his lungs protest the residue. Always observing, always comparing. At last autumn edges in. Morning mists pool in the ha-ha. Beech leaves crisp and drift. Inside the laboratory, red calx of mercury waits upon the shelf, calling his attention back from leaves and weather to the crucible's quiet heat. He decides, almost impulsively, to make another attempt at collecting its vapor, this time under conditions of utter dryness and with a fresh blown bell jar polished clear as river ice. He cleans the apparatus until glass sings under cloth, seals joints double, and places the calx within. A spirit lamp flickers beneath, patient and blue. As the powder shifts from dull crimson to brilliant orange, Priestley leans close, eyes level with retort neck, and sees the faintest shimmer, like breath on winter air, drift along the tube. It bubbles through the water into his inverted jar, displacing liquid with graceful inevitability. The jar fills, clear as nothing, yet somehow more than nothing. He marks the jar's mouth with sealing wax and the date, August 1st, 1774. Though he does not yet test this sample, intuition pulses that something extraordinary percolates inside the glass, a supple, life-giving spirit, perhaps the very quadrant of his earlier chart left dreaming for a name. Night descends, cool and starshot. He extinguishes lamps, lingers a heartbeat longer in the doorway, and lets a tide of quiet pride sweep through him. Work well laid awaits sunrise. Answers wait like apples ripe for picking. He closes the laboratory door on the hush of water lapping gently in the trough and walks the polished corridor back to his chambers, footfalls muffled by Turkish runners. In his breast pocket the sealed jar rides lightly, almost glowing, though no light touches it. As he undresses by candle stub, he draws one last deliberate breath, slow, grateful, filled with the calm certainty that knowledge, once sought in smoky attics over clattering streets, now blossoms in the open air of a generous estate. Crawling beneath linen sheets, he listens to owls trade calls across beach tops and feels sleep rise like soft tidewater. The jar on the bedside table stands silent sentinel, the unknown pressed close as a heartbeat. You too may settle beside that quiet promise. Allow eyelids to flutter shut, muscles to yield. Let your own breath move unhindered, renewed by imagined mint leaves under midday sun. Inhale patience, exhale hurry. The world tilts toward discovery, but discovery will wait until morning. For now, rest in the spacious dark of Bowood House, where thought drifts like orchard scent and every inhalation is a prelude to wonder. The birth of a brilliant heir. Dawn in Wiltshire arrives on tiptoe, silvering the glassy lake below Bowood House and tracing pale fringe along the horizon where larks first pierce the hush. Joseph Priestley stands at his laboratory window, one palm pressed against the cool sash, eyes fixed on the far line of meadows just beginning to glow. He has slept lightly, roused before the valet knocked, compelled by an intuition so steady it felt like the quiet pulse of the world itself. Today, some inner voice insists, you must return to the red calx of Mercury. He inhales, slow and deliberate, letting the breath lift his rib cage as though raising a curtain on a stage. When he exhales, a calm resolve settles in his bones. The memory of last evening's sealed jar, colorless yet subtly luminous, rests like a small ember in his thoughts. He crosses the freshly scrubbed floor and lights 2 lamps, their twin flames blooming soft yellow halos against the whitewashed walls. Glass instruments gleam awake. On a marble slab by the window sits the crimson powder, mercuric oxide, ground to a fine, almost velvety texture. From apothecaries it comes labeled red precipitate, but to Priestley it is a door waiting on the slightest pressure to swing open. He prepares with monkish care. The retort neck, wiped with linen and alcohol, must be spotless. The connecting tube sits snug beneath water in the trough. He adds a shallow inch of fresh well water, cold, clear, mirror still. Each joint receives a dab of soft beeswax. A notebook lies nearby, quill poised, but he refrains from writing just yet. First, experience must unfold in silence. He spoons a measured dram of red calx into the porcelain capsule beneath the bell-shaped glass. The powder piles like rusted snowdrift. Drawing a long breath, 4 counts in. He lights the spirit lamp beneath, turns the brass wick holder until the flame lengthens to a steady blue spear, and steps back watching. First nothing. Then the crimson begins to brighten, orange overtaking red the way sunrise overtakes night. Minute by minute the hue glows hotter, and a shimmer of vapor, so faint it could be imagined, threads up the retort's neck, a dancer in an invisible ballet. It bubbles through the water, each sphere sliding upward until it finds space beneath the inverted jar. There, a new air collects, clearer than stillness and somehow crisper to the eye than common emptiness. Priestley notes mentally the rate. 5 bubbles per breath, now 8, now 10. He waits until the jar is half filled, then gently moves the spirit lamp aside so heat dwindles but does not die. The bubbling slows, then ceases, leaving the calx a dull gray mass. Pure mercury beads gather like tiny mirrors, proof the powder surrendered a hidden portion of itself to become metal once more. That hidden portion is what now dazzles him. He seals the jar under water with a greased stopper and lifts it slowly, cool liquid cascading down its sides. Holding the glass to the first light of morning, he senses, not sees but senses, an energy within, like starlight held in a crystal dome. For a moment he simply breathes with eyes closed, inhaling confidence, exhaling the last wisps of doubt. The demonstration must be simple, decisive. On the bench rests a slender taper, its wick freshly trimmed and primed. He sets the sealed jar upright, removes the stopper, and slides the taper in until only the flame sits inside the rim. Instantly the candle roars to life. No flicker, no languor, but a tall, brilliant column of white gold that outshines the twin lamps, throws crisp shadows, and hums with a near-audible vigor. It burns as though the very essence of fire had waited centuries for this reunion. Priestley's breath catches, plain air suddenly tasting dull by comparison. He counts 1, 2, 3 heartbeats. The taper does not waver. It flares brighter still, consuming wax greedily, until at last the flame gutters only because the wick itself is gone. He withdraws the smoking stub, chest thrumming. In the hush left by the vanquished fire, he hears his pulse in his ears, steady yet amazed. He sets quill to paper, hand surprisingly calm. Air from red calx of mercury, supports combustion with extraordinary vigor, appears to be nearly devoid of phlogiston. He pauses, dips the nib again, produces a feeling of sublimely pure respiration when cautiously inhaled. Cautiously he must test it on himself. That is the habit of the age. He fills a slim glass tube, lets common air flush away, then draws a single measured breath through moistened lips. It is unlike any inhalation he has ever known. Cooler, as though imbued with mountain stream, and startlingly fresh, as if lungs open wider to greet it. A lightness spreads behind his eyes. Clarity rings like a struck bell from temple to temple. He exhales slowly, marveling at how ordinary air now feels heavy, sluggish. Again to the notebook. Sensation of ease surpassing common air. Mice, candles, likely all living creatures would thrive longer. With methodical care he repeats the candle test in a control jar of common air. As expected, the flame burns modestly, a tame domestic glow. In fixed air it sputters then dies within moments. But in this new, dephlogisticated air, a provisional phrase, fire seems to find its homeland. Soft knock interrupts. Young William Shelburne appears carrying the morning's post. Priestley thanks him, sets letters aside unopened, and invites the boy to witness a harmless marvel. William watches eyes wide as the candle leaps bright in one jar, droops in another. Priestley explains gently that different kinds of air shape life and flame. The boy's wonder plants seeds of future curiosity in fertile mind. Priestley feels briefly the proud guardian of that seed. When William leaves, he consults his supply. Still 3/4 of the miraculous gas remain. He fetches a small white mouse from a wicker cage, a creature accustomed to his gentle handling. Placing the mouse in a bell jar flushed with foul, spent air, he notes the little body soon falters. Then carefully he introduces a fresh measure of dephlogisticated air beneath. The mouse rights itself, fur bristling, whiskers twitching with revived energy. It cleans its face, sniffs, and begins to explore. Priestley's smile softens into humble awe. Outside the window, clouds part, and a shaft of sunlight strikes the retort, turning mercury beads to glittering beads of daybreak. Nature herself seems to applaud. He sits, takes one more reflective breath, and chooses words to mark the gravity of the moment. I have found an air in which a candle burned out of proportion, and wherein a living creature appeared restored beyond expectation. If we can procure this air with facility, it may prove of the greatest medicinal benefit. He underlines greatest twice, then closes the book with hands clasped around its leather cover, feeling its heartbeat echo his own. A thought surfaces. Could this air, once collected, ease the suffocation of miners, relieve consumptives, transform infirmaries? Could it, more wondrous still, explain why green plants make stagnated rooms tolerable? The web begins to weave. Sunlight, plants, pure air, animal life, back to exhaled foul air, returned again by leaves. A divine harmony cycles above and within each creature. He stands and opens the laboratory window, letting Bowood's orchard breath mingle with the rarefied contents of his jar. For a fleeting moment he imagines the entire estate infused, every chestnut canopy and robin's trill sharing in this freshness. Though impractical, the vision buoys him. Soon shelves display 3 stopper jars, each marked with date and sequence, each harboring the brilliant air. He secures them with cotton cords lest careless hands jostle them. Yet they appear almost weightless, buoyant even, as though holding not substance but promise. Mid-morning arrives. Lady Shelburne expects reports on her son's Latin progress. Priestley tidies the bench, documenting temperatures, sample volumes, and flame lengths with crisp brevity. He washes residue from the crucible, watching gray mercury flakes swim like quicksilver fish before settling. The spirit lamp he caps, still warm beneath his fingertips, as though cradling the very spark of discovery. Before leaving he lingers by the trough. Water lies still again, surface mirroring his thoughtful gaze. He dips one finger. Concentric ripples spread, fade, vanish. So too, he muses, might today's revelation ripple outward, first through letters to Franklin and Engine House, then through Royal Society proceedings, eventually lapping at the shores of medicine, industry, exploration. Perhaps sailors will breathe easier below decks. Perhaps hospitals will be filled with air bright as dawn. He closes the door with ceremony and strides down the corridor. Each step resounds lighter, as though the new air already lifts his heels. Servants greeting him note the sparkle in his eye. He answers their courtesy with warmth deeper than routine. Down the grand staircase, across the marble hall, and out onto the sunlit terrace he walks, pausing only to gaze over Capability Brown's vast lake. Swans drift under willow shadows. Beyond, fields ripple green to the far ridge. Every leaf, every ripple, every breath of wind now feels linked, an interlaced system exchanging invisible gifts. He draws a full breath, tasting apple blossom. Even this ordinary air, he knows, bears some measure of the life-giving principle, just isolated, diluted but sufficient. He whispers gratitude, unvoiced words riding the exhale into the morning breeze. Lessons commence. Hours glide by wrapped in Virgil and Euclid. Yet behind each recitation flickers the morning's flame, bright remembrance. When the boys break for luncheon, he sits alone beneath a cedar and drafts a letter to Franklin. My dear sir, I flatter myself with an experiment that promises consequences beyond my humble forecast. The nib flies, his script fast yet legible. He folds the sheet, addresses it to Craven Street, and seals the envelope with red wax. The blob cools into a puckered heart, imperfect, human, earnest. Afternoon shadows lengthen. In the orangery citrus lamps glow like miniature suns. Their fragrance drifts along cloister walks. Priestley crosses gravel paths toward the main house, pockets heavy with ink-stained index cards detailing every step of the discovery. He will dine lightly, curried rice and early peas, and return to the laboratory by lamplight to test solubility ratios in water, measure flame heights with finer rule, and perhaps, at last, settle upon a provisional name worthy of so potent a breath. Night will find him again beside the trough, hands steady, mind luminous. But for now, as late sunlight glitters off leaded panes, he grants himself a quiet moment. Standing under an arch of climbing roses, he closes his eyes, inhales the garden's perfumed air, and senses beneath its sweetness the brighter, subtler current of the new, nameless element, pure, buoyant, indispensable. Let that same breath find you. Draw it gently. Let it widen your chest with calm vitality. Sense its cool path down the throat, shoulder blades easing open like shutters. Hold a moment, as Priestley did, staring at the miraculous flame, then release, slow, unrushed, feeling ordinary cares dim like candles deprived of air. Twilight hums in the yews, and owls prepare their silent patrols. Within Bowood's laboratory, 3 glass sentinels glow faintly in lamplight, harboring the future in colorless stillness. Somewhere beyond the hills, miners cough, patients wheeze, sailors suffocate in stale holds, unaware that relief now waits in a quiet wing of a country estate. History for the moment sleeps, and so may you. Close the window of the mind, allow lids to drift. Know that within each simple inhalation you share the same gift that once flared a fingertip of flame bright as sunrise, that sustained a tiny mouse, that whispered to a young dissenting theologian that he had unlatched a bigger door than he had ever dared to imagine. Breathe easily, float upon the pristine air of sleep, and let discovery watch over your dreams. Letters across the channel. London breathes heat and soot into a late summer afternoon. the Thames glinting dull pewter beneath a haze of coal smoke and distant ship bells. Joseph Priestley has come up from Bowood to read a short paper before the Royal Society, yet his thoughts stray far from the varnished tables of Crane Court. Tucked in the inner pocket of his coat lie 2 letters, one addressed to Monsieur Antoine Laurent Lavoisier of Paris, the other to Sir John Pringle, President of the Society, each folded so many times the creases feel like years. They weigh almost nothing, yet they carry an argument that could tip the scales of chemical doctrine. Pause and give yourself a gentle breath, unhurried. Feel shoulders loosen as if laying down burdens no heavier than those letters. Inside Crane Court, oak paneling absorbs lamplight, and murmured gossip swells like a tide. Talk of Cook's voyages, of a curious hot air balloon rumored in France, of a storm that toppled steeples in Cornwall. When Priestley begins, his voice is measured, almost soft, but clarity lends it reach. He describes the dephlogisticated air from red calx of mercury. He recounts mice revived, candles blazing. Several fellows nod, intrigued. A few frown, tethered to the familiar comfort of phlogiston theory, that every combustible body contains a fiery principle that escapes during burning. Afterward, in the lobby scented faintly of pipe smoke and rain-damp wool, Sir John claps Priestley on the shoulder. "Extraordinary, my dear doctor, quite extraordinary." Yet another fellow whispers that the new air might simply be common air purified of earthly effluvia. Priestley smiles, half-bow, pocket spectacles, and answers with humility. "I publish that others may test. Truth thrives on the scrutiny of friends." The words are sincere. He believes science moves forward as a parliament of careful minds. That evening he lodges on Norfolk Street in a narrow room whose sash window quivers at every carriage rumble. By candlefall he sets quill to paper, answering letters from Birmingham colleagues, James Watt, Matthew Bolton, who ask whether the new air could quicken furnace fires. He writes patiently that more trials are needed. The gas, though abundant in principle, is still dear in practice. His quill scratches steady rhythms like gentle oars in water, and you might let your breath follow that rhythm. 4 counts in, 6 counts out, settling into the hush that wraps a city after midnight bells. Weeks pass. Autumn tips leaves toward gold. Back at Bowood, a courier arrives bearing a neat packet sealed with vermilion wax and the crest of the Académie des Sciences. Lavoisier writes in elegant strokes, thanking Priestley for the pamphlet and announcing parallel observations on the calcination of lead, tin, and mercury. He hints, however, at a radical interpretation. Perhaps air is not a homogeneous fluid impregnated by phlogiston, but a mixture of elastic fluids whose proportions shift in every chemical drama. Priestley reads the lines twice, heart quickened. Across the channel, a mind sharp as flint has struck a spark that may set old theory ablaze. For a moment he closes eyes, breathes the cedar-tinged air of the library, and remembers advice given by Franklin years before. Dispute with good humor, for anger blinds discovery. He drafts a cordial reply, offering further data, inviting reciprocal candor. 2 pages in, he lays down the quill, lifts gaze to the window where late sun shards prism through leaded glass, and allows a long, slow exhale to unwind the thrill into gentle steadiness. Soon Bowood's halls echo with the quiet creak of diplomatic footsteps. The Earl discusses America's rebellion with Fox and Burke. At supper he asks Priestley whether pure air might treat the fevers plaguing sailors blockading Boston. Joseph responds thoughtfully, describing how patients in foul wards improved when windows were thrown wide and sprigs of mint were placed on sills, anecdotes hinting at unseen tides of health. He speaks softly so servants will not disturb the hush, yet clearly enough that curiosity ripples along the table like reflections on water. Night after night, the correspondence chain lengthens. Paris sends questions about experimental minutiae, temperatures, vessel volumes, thickness of glass, and Priestley's replies grow ever more precise. Spirit lamp adjusted so that mercury oxide begins to exhibit orange glow at 563 degrees of Fahrenheit. Jar capacity 12 pints wine measure. Flame of candle rose 1 3/4 inches higher than in common air. These details march across paper like disciplined troops readying for battle of ideas. And a battle it will be. In early 1775, pamphlets circulate in London taverns claiming that phlogiston is a philosophical ghost, that what truly combines with metals when they rust is not fire escaping but an air entering, namely Priestley's own brilliant air. Some chemists bridle. A few scoff that English dissenters dabbling in philosophy cannot overturn German foundations. Priestley remains courteous, repeating that evidence will guide belief, not pride. Still, he feels tension coil under his ribs like a tightened mainspring. Take a moment, breathe deliberately, and soften any coil of your own. Let the inhale rise gentle through ribs. Let the exhale fall away, carrying any brittle feeling with it. Seeking respite from controversy, he journeys north to Leeds, where old friends at Mill Hill Chapel greet him with pews newly sanded and memories still warm. In the attic lab, dusty but serviceable, he repeats the red calx experiment before a circle of local apothecaries. The forgotten room smells of beeswax, faint malt, and nostalgia. When the candle bursts into white flame, the apothecaries gasp, one crossing himself. Priestley merely notes the flame's height against the jar tick marks. Evidence plain as sunrise. From Leeds he travels to Birmingham to deliver lectures at the Lunar Society. Those midnight gatherings of Watt, Bolton, Erasmus Darwin, and Josiah Wedgwood. In Soho House drawing room, moonlight slants across porcelain vases while brass prototypes gleam atop mahogany. Priestley unpacks a portable trough, a pinch of red calx, and a small glass cylinder. Murmurs quiet. Experiments speak. As pure air renews a glowing coal, Watt's mind leaps to possibilities for blast furnaces. Bolton imagines brighter lamps for watchmaker lathes. Afterward, plates of spiced beef and syllabub arrive, and conversation swirls. Could mining lamps burn cleaner? Could diving bells last longer? Could steam engines run hotter? Darwin, half philosopher, raises a speculative toast. To the air that kindles life, and to the gentleman who bottled dawn. Laughter rings soft against shuttered windows. Glasses clink. And somewhere in the distance a foundry whistle sighs like a giant exhaling. Later, alone at the guest chamber desk, Priestley records every observation in precise cursive. Yet as candle wanes, he pauses, stares at flame's blue cusp, and wrestles a private doubt. If this new air truly carries no phlogiston, then what of Scripture's references to the spirit of fire? What of sermons preached on combustion as moral allegory? He is, after all, still a minister. Faith and experiment meet within him like two rivers conjoining, turbid at first, then gradually clearing. He kneels beside bed, offering prayer not for victory in debate but for clarity of mind, humility of heart. When he lies down, arms folded, the linen smells of lavender and ironstone hearth smoke. He breathes slow, counting 1, 2, 3. Sleep gathers. Feel your own limbs ease into such quiet. Imagine lavender's soft edge mingling with hum of distant forges. Inhale tranquility. Exhale the static of the day. Spring of 1776 sees Lavoisier publish Memoir sur la combustion, asserting that metals gain weight by absorbing air pure, while Priestley stands by phlogiston, yet not stubbornly, rather patiently. He sails across the channel at Shelburne's, urging to demonstrate his apparatus before the Academy in Paris. The journey is gentle. Gulls wheel, channel waves slap the hull in steady heartbeats, and he stands at rail breathing brine-flecked wind, wondering how much phlogiston might hide in seawater spray. A whimsical thought that nonetheless finds its way into the margin of his diary. In Paris salons he meets Madame Lavoisier, quick-witted, fluent in English, who sketches apparatus as fast as he describes them. Antoine himself listens courteously, eyes narrowed in calculation. They compare notebooks over coffee, exchanging temperatures, flame colors, mercury residues. Priestley witnesses Antoine weigh powders to fractions of a grain, and he recognizes a rigor he has not always observed in his own haste to publish. No jealousy stirs, only respect salted with resolve to measure more precisely henceforth. On an April afternoon, they perform a joint trial. Lavoisier heats red calx in a porcelain retort connected to a pre-evacuated bell jar sitting on a scale. As orange glow fills the crucible, oxygen, though it is not yet called so, streams in and the jar's weight rises. Lavoisier smiles softly. Priestley, by contrast, puzzles. If air leaves the calx, why does the system gain? Antoine explains his theory of conservation. Joseph nods, pockets scribbled weight data, and later writes, "Observation impossible to reconcile with pure phlogiston, further reflection required." Evenings in Paris end late. Coaches rattle over cobbles, perfume drifts from doorway niches, and torches gutter in iron sconces. Yet within his rented room near the Seine, Priestley favors candle, quill, and long breaths of cool night air wafting past white curtains. He writes letters home, one to Shelburne describing polite debate, another to the lunar men describing weights and balances. He admits he stands at a crossroads. Either phlogiston must be reimagined as a substance with negative mass, or else the whole notion must be surrendered. Truth, he decides, will choose its own champion. He must remain servant, not master. You might find comfort in that gentle yielding. Let a breath in soften the brow. Let the breath out carry away the need to cling to old certainties. When he returns to England, London buzzes with talk of revolution in America, of new taxes, of Captain Cook's fate in Hawaii. Yet among chemists the hottest news is not political but pneumatic. Foreign memoirs citing oxygen, a name Lavoisier coins meaning acid former, hint that Priestley's dephlogisticated air is the primal base of every acid as well as of respiration. Some English journals bristle at French pomp. Priestley feels neither insult nor pride, only obligation to keep experimenting. He installs a larger laboratory in Birmingham, funded partly by friends, partly by his modest royalties from the history of electricity. Shelves now hold retorts of porcelain, cylinders of iron, a new balance accurate to 100th grain. On walls hang two portraits, one of Boyle, symbol of experimental honesty, and one of Franklin, symbol of amiable discourse. They remind him to weigh, to question, and to smile. In this new lab he tests everything: iron filings heated in sealed vessels, phosphorus burning under jars, blood from a freshly slaughtered sheep absorbing oxygen with ravenous appetite. He pumps exhaled breath across lime water and measures precipitate. Each datum presses upon the phlogiston story like a thumb upon soft wax. Impressions deepen, divergence widens. Yet he retains his spirit of kindness. When reviewers attack his adherence to phlogiston, he replies, "Let experiment decide between us, and we shall remain friends though our theories part company." Even Lavoisier confides admiration for such grace, though the Frenchman's pen remains sharp on scientific points. Breathe now as Priestley does when controversy rattles the windows. Pull air in gently, feel it brighten the mind. Release it slowly, feel judgment soften. You, like him, can rest amid debate, held by the steady rhythm of lungs. By 1779 pamphlets flourish like spring dandelions. Philosophical disquisitions, heavy with equations, land on desks from Paris to Philadelphia. Priestley reads them by lamplight, annotating margins with polite question marks, careful exclamation points. Some nights, fatigue silts over eyelids. He sets quill aside and steps into the garden where dew blankets mignonette, and moths flit between pale blossoms. He inhales night air, remembering that its peace exists independent of human explanation. Whether called phlogisticated nitrogen or simply dusk's cool sigh, it cradles him the same. Feel that dusk settle around you now. Imagine garden earth still warm beneath bare feet. Imagine stars just beginning to puncture the sky like tiny pinholes letting eternity peek through. Breathe once, twice, unhurried. Mid-conversation with nature. He returns to bed, the open window spilling sweet breeze across linen. In dream he sees letters floating on water, Pöjesen, then reforming into the word Oxygen. He does not find terror in the change. Rather, he feels language itself evolve the way apples ripen from green to gold. When morning breaks, he records the dream with amusement, adds another line to his notebook. Names change, facts remain. Must honor both. And so, through letters, lectures, and lingering friendships, the debate continues. A cordial duel fought with balances, flames, and gentle humor. Priestley's own stance will shift slowly, yet his humility will never waver. He will die still questioning, still lighting candles in different airs, still blessing disagreement as the surest path to shared light. Tonight, you share that path only in quiet, vicarious steps, and each breath you take is a small candle burning bright in the atmosphere of thought. So ease deeper into rest. Let shoulders sink into mattress or chair. Let mind unspool like ribbon. The correspondence may wait till dawn. The arguments may rest upon a shelf beside retorts and jars. For now you breathe, simple and profound, exactly as Priestley did while pondering letters across the channel. In each inhale lies possibility. In each exhale, release. May that rhythm cradle you as gently as the Thames cradled a candle's reflection on a quiet London night. Torch of Liberty. Night settles over Birmingham in July 1791, but peace does not follow. Sultry air presses against tile roofs. Thunderheads loom just beyond the city's faint glow, rumbling like a giant turning in restless sleep. In a modest manse on Sparkbrook Lane, Joseph Priestley sits at a harpsichord, coaxing calm chords while his wife, Mary, arranges supper plates for guests soon to arrive. The dining room windows stand wide to coax a breeze, yet only overheated stillness enters, tinged with the smell of coal tar, ironworks, and an undertow of approaching anger. The guests this evening are members of the Lunar Society. Watt, Bolton, Darwin, Keir, gathered not merely to exchange chemical notes but to toast the second anniversary of the French Revolution's storming of the Bastille. The mood should be celebratory. Liberty's promise, reason triumphant, shackles loosening across the channel. Priestley, whose Unitarian sermons already advocate political reform, hopes the dinner may inspire a pamphlet on reconciliation between crown and conscience. As first footsteps tap the porch, allow your own breath to slow, filling ribs like a gentle bellows. Inhale 4 counts, exhale 6. Around you candlelight steadies. Conversation blossoms. Quiet laughter, clink of decanters. Yet beyond the garden wall a distant shout slashes the summer dusk. Then another, closer. The gathering pauses. Forks hover mid-air. Priestley moves to the window and glimpses a flicker of torchlight far down the lane. A group of men surges past the hedge, voices rough with ale and fury. Someone shouts, "Church burners!" An accusation hurled at dissenting ministers like Priestley who oppose state religion. Another voice growls, "French dogs!" And the crowd turns toward the manse, torches bobbing. Priestley's pulse leaps. Still he draws a single anchoring breath. "Friends, we must depart," he says with calm forged in years of pulpit composure. Papers, experimental notes, letters from Franklin and Lavoisier, lie on his desk. He scoops them into a valise. Mary gathers her cloisonné snuff-box, a keepsake from Bowood. Together they usher guests through the back door into night gardens perfumed by bruised roses and fear. Beyond the yew hedge, hooves hammer. Rioters drag a cart laden with pitch. They chant, hurl stones. Glass shatters. The parlor window implodes in a crystalline sigh. Flames lick curtains, illuminating shelves where jars of dephlogisticated air glimmer briefly before bursting in pops of glass and hissing vapor. The library, oak, calfskin, years of marginalia. crackles, curls, collapses inward as if bowing in fiery grief. Priestley and companions skirt hedgerows, breath sharp in throats, until they reach a narrow lane leading toward Edgbaston. Behind them, the night blooms orange. Sparks whirl up, twinning with summer lightning now splitting the bruise-colored sky. The riot spreads. Other dissenting chapels, homes, and laboratories ignite like dominoes of resentment. Somewhere a church bell tolls, warning, judgment, or both. Pause and draw another breath. Feel the chest expand against imaginary thunder, then soften. By dawn the manse lies in embers, laboratory tools twisted in grotesque silhouettes. A soaked journal page flaps against charred beams, ink blurred but a single line legible. Let us erect truth upon the ruins of error. Soldiers finally ride in, too late. The priest-chemist, now homeless, shelters with friends. Yet within him, a new resolve kindles hotter than any torch. Freedom of inquiry and conscience must find firmer soil. Letters fly across Britain. Some Tory papers cheer the Birmingham mob for defending church and king. Others condemn the violence. Priestley, though shaken, writes to London journals appealing for justice, not in rage, but in reasoned prose. He refuses bitterness, believing hatred suffocates thought like fixed air stifles flame. Weeks blur into legal petitions, public disputes, and whispered threats. Family belongings, scorched yet precious, are packed into crates bound for London, then pressed aboard a packet ship, active, heading west. America, land of Franklin, now beckons as refuge. Before sailing, Priestley preaches once more at Gravel Pit Chapel, Hackney. His voice, though husky with smoke-inhaled remnants, carries gentle power. Let persecution purify, not poison. Let us breathe freely wherever truth calls. On a rainy April morning 1794, the Thames smells of tar and brine as Priestley, Mary, and 3 grown sons step onto the quarterdeck. Sails billow. Gulls screech overhead. Below decks, amidst trunks of books half-scorched and retorts dented by riot clubs, sits a single sealed jar of oxygen, clear as hope, rescued from the ruins. Joseph cradles it moment, then braces it between crates. As Active glides past Gravesend, he inhales damp sea air tinged with hemp and salt, contemplating the unknown continent. Each breath feels like slate wiped clean. Each exhale carries ash of past halls, past hearths, past theories may be ready to be remade. Let your own breath mimic that cleanse. Draw in ocean-cool clarity. Release old embers. Weeks at sea stretch languid. Priestley lectures crew on storm's electricity. Uses bits of glass and sealing wax to spark tiny crackles that tease away doldrum boredom. At night he stands on deck beneath star-littered vastness, charting constellations and musing how the same oxygen he discovered fuels every quiet surge in sailors' chests and every silent burn in distant suns. Landfall. Delaware River glides broad and brown under July heat. Willows dip fronds. Fireflies stitch green sparks along the bank. Friends from Philadelphia's American Philosophical Society greet him with embrace and homespun coats. They arrange temporary lodgings near High Street where printers clatter and debate clings to tavern air thicker than molasses. Yet political winds swirl here too. Federalists eye French sympathizing dissenters with suspicion. When yellow fever seizes the city, some whisper foreign radicals brought contagion. Priestley remains unbowed. He opens a modest chapel in Northumberland, Pennsylvania, frontier town poised where the Susquehanna splits, preaching conscience, publishing tracts, erecting yet another laboratory beside a slow river. Picture that new lab. Clabbered shed smelling of pine, shelves bare but for a few salvaged bell jars, and that single jar of bowwood oxygen, now set on a sunny sill like a silent votive lamp. He begins again. Heating manganese, distilling niter, collecting airs above mercury columns. Neighborhood children bring frogs and minnows for philosophical trials. He repays them with lessons on rainbows, magnetism, the rights of man. Letters still cross the Atlantic. Lavoisier, embroiled in revolution's cauldron, writes warm assurances, then is guillotined before the next post. Priestley receives the news at dawn. He grips a porch rail, breath leaving him in a ragged gust. For a full minute he gazes at river fog, silent. Then he whispers, "The Republic has murdered her best chemist," and vows his friend's rigor will not die with him. Seasons wheel. Snowmelt swells Susquehanna. Maples flame crimson, then bare themselves to steely skies. Priestley, aging yet tireless, pens letters to the inhabitants of Northumberland and disquisitions on matter and spirit, fusing theology and science in prose lucid as winter air. Critics call him stubborn. Admirers call him steadfast. He simply calls himself a seeker. One crisp October evening, he invites townsfolk to witness a demonstration. 2 candles, 2 jars, one of common air, one of oxygen. The sun sets rosy over corn stubble. Harvest moon hovers. He lights both candles. In common air, flame dances meekly. In oxygen, it blazes tall, steady. Children gasp. Farmers nod slow. An old woman murmurs prayer. Priestley explains how liberty of thought resembles that vigorous flame. Given atmosphere rich in tolerance, the smallest wick of intellect can illuminate vast dark. Draw that image into your breath. With inhale, picture steady flame fed by pure air. With exhale, imagine prejudices whisked away like smoke. Storms still thunder. Controversies still brew. Yet each dawn finds Priestley at his writing desk, quill scratching toward sunrise, or at riverbank, sketching apparatus improvements in mud with walking stick. He hosts Quaker neighbors, indigenous traders, even skeptical ministers, treating every mind as jar waiting gentle infusion of fresh air. One spring morning 1804, after hours revising an essay on free inquiry, he feels sudden tightness between ribs. He sets quill aside, opens sash, and breathes the dew-laden morning. Magnolia, river, wood smoke. Pain softens. Peace blooms. He tells son Joseph Jr., "I am ready, now or whenever the master of breath shall call." Within days he slips quietly from consciousness. Friends keep vigil as final inhalations grow shallow yet serene, like embers settling into ashglow. The man who bottled dawn exhales one last time, surrendering to the grand equilibrium he spent life studying. Think of that breath, then of yours. Tide rolling sure, rhythmic, infinite. Allow eyelids to drift. Feel mattress, chair, or floor cradle limbs loosened of tension. Around you no mob bangs at doors, no sermon demands defense. Only the hush of night and the torch Priestley carried, now resting in gentle hands of history, still shedding calm light. If stray thoughts crackle like distant riot, picture them flaming out against the clarity of oxygen-rich night sky, leaving only stars. Breathe once more, deep, cool, fearless. Let the torch of liberty glow steady within, illuminating a path toward tranquil sleep. And as dreams gather, remember, every breath you draw is kin to the brilliant air Priestley freed from crimson powder, an invisible testament to resilience, curiosity, and the quiet courage to begin again amid ashes. New horizons in America. Gulls wheel above the Delaware as the brig Active eases into Philadelphia's harbor, her timbers creaking like an old violin settling into tune. Lines are thrown, sails luff and collapse, and Joseph Priestley steps onto the swaying gangplank with the steady poise of a man accustomed to beginnings. Behind him the city exhales mercantile bustle, carters calling prices, dockhands singing shanties, printers' apprentices rattling handcarts of fresh-baked type. Ahead, the tree-lined streets of a republic still smelling of wet ink and possibility. Pause here with him and let a slow breath bloom inside your chest. Draw in for 4, hold a beat, release for 6, as though savoring the tang of river mist and springtime loam. Friends from the American Philosophical Society, scholars and merchants both, escort Priestley past red brick warehouses toward a waiting carriage. They have found temporary lodgings on High Street above a bookshop that stocks everything from Paine's Rights of Man to the latest almanacs forecasting eclipses. The narrow stair creaks under trunks scarred by riot and saltwater. A single dormer window looks west toward low hills greening with May. The room smells of pine floors, candle wax, and fresh adventure. Days blur into a gentle whirlwind. In Independence Hall he shakes hands with President Adams, whose smile is formal but whose eyes spark at mention of vital air. At the University of Pennsylvania, he tours an anatomy theater where students itch to test oxygen's effect on blood. Everywhere doors open on promise. Yet city heat gathers. Mosquitoes breed in dockside puddles, and rumors of yellow fever drift like unseen miasma. By late July, the river air feels thick as brewed wort. Advisors urge the newcomer to flee inland until the pestilence subsides. And so, after nightly prayers for Philadelphia's safety, Priestley and family board a flat-bottomed bateau upriver, gliding past maples whose leaves hang motionless in humid gloom. As oars dip and rise, Joseph closes his eyes, breathing the rhythmic splash the way a musician counts measures, slow and steady, as though each exhale could push them farther from illness. After 3 languid days, the boat noses onto a muddy bank at Northumberland, Pennsylvania, where the west and north branches of the Susquehanna entwine like 2 arms in welcome. The village is no more than a scatter of clapboard houses, a tavern smelling of rye mash, and fields of maize trembling in cicada song. But the land holds space, wide, sky-domed, forgiving. Priestley steps ashore, fingertips brushing tall switchgrass, and feels tension unwind down to his heels. A modest frame house is leased swiftly. Its whitewashed walls glow pearl in slanted afternoon sun. Its porch commands a quiet view of river mirrored in copper dusk. In back stands a weather-grade smokehouse the landlord abandoned years prior. Perfect, Joseph decides, for a laboratory reborn. By lamplight he and his sons sweep cobwebs, plane splintered benches, and fit windows with oiled paper to soften glare. Glass chimneys rescued from Birmingham unpack intact. A single jar of bowwood oxygen, wrapped in quilt wadding, emerges unbroken, shimmering like captive moonlight. Imagine the hush of that shed at dawn. Dew tap dancing on cedar shingles, blue jays quarreling in walnut branches. Inside, retorts glint, crucibles wait, and water in the battered pneumatic trough lies still as thought held breath. Priestley touches the jar, offers silent gratitude, then draws his first true lungful of New World morning, cool, resin-scented, tinged with wild mint drifting from riverbank. He notes how easily chest expands here, how brisk the mind feels. In notebook margin he jots, "Atmosphere remarkably vivifying. May inquire as to proportion of vital air in forest regions." He begins again, just as the Susquehanna begins each day with swirling silt and fresh reflections. Children from neighboring cabins bring squirrel bones, curious stones, crayfish in buckets. In exchange he shows them sparks leaping between silvered sticks, bottles that seem to drink candle flames, and leaves that restore spent air under noon's hard light. Their laughter turns the laboratory into something half school, half chapel. Midsummer unfurls like a long, warm ribbon. Priestley plants rows of beans and cabbages to test vegetative purification under controlled jars, shading half the leaves to measure light's influence. In the evenings he strolls the river trail with Mary. Fireflies drift above grass in slow constellations, and far owls string soft beads of sound through cottonwood groves. Each night before bed, he writes letters to both London dissenters and Parisian savants, though the latter replies come now from colleagues of Lavoisier, who fell to the guillotine months prior. The news had struck like a chill squall, yet here, under American stars, sorrow gradually folds into resolve. Discovery must outlive tyrants as surely as rivers outlive dams. Autumn arrives on frosted breath. Corn shocks stand like sentinels in grey dawn. In the shed, charcoal glows beneath manganese dioxide, releasing a fresh rush of oxygen that blows autumn's chill from the room. Priestley times the bubbling, measures its volume with a pewter syringe made by a local tinsmith. His sons help chart flame heights versus gas purity, their pencil marks crisp, slanted, purposeful. One evening they suspend a steel spring inside a sealed jar of oxygen. In morning it bears a bloom of rust, weight increased. Another nail, identical, rusts scarcely at all in common air. The cycle first glimpsed by Lavoisier now repeats under frontier lanterns, and Priestley records results without rancor. Only curiosity polished by years of debate. On Sundays townsfolk gather in the front parlor. No steeple, no stained glass, while Joseph preaches sermons braided from scripture and empirical wonder. He speaks of creation as a living laboratory, of conscience as the candle kept bright by good air, of truth as something that grows, not calcifies. Farmers nod, hats in hand. Women hum low lullabies to restless infants. When service ends, neighbors linger over cider, trading seed corn for advice on crop rotation. The homestead hums like a hive, life and thought inseparable. Winter presses in, rivers kin to steel, winds honed on icy ridges. By firelight Priestley drafts letters to the inhabitants of Northumberland, arguing for freedom of inquiry and the folly of persecution. Sentences unspool measured as breaths in cold rooms. Outside, the laboratory sleeping under snow, glass jars huddle like translucent animals in straw-lined crates. Yet even here experiment whispers. Frost feathers pattern panes according to gradients of warmth, a natural barometer he sketches with childlike delight. When January thaw arrives, he fills one jar with frigid river air and another with air warmed above the hearth, then times how long candles burn in each. Warm air wins by precious seconds. He muses on atmospheric density, on the lungs of woodcutters laboring in drifted ravines, on how simple warmth might stretch human endurance. His science remains domestic, intimate, spun from hearthside observation, yet its implications reach outward like willow roots finding moisture in unseen soil. Spring 1796 paints the valley in watercolor greens. Wild geese arrow north. Sap buckets drip faint staccato in maple groves. Priestley, hair silvering at temples, builds a larger shed with clapboard walls bright as new parchment. Two Quaker carpenters raise rafters while children chase chickens through sawdust. Within weeks shelves host polished copper stills, a newly imported balance, and an innovative candle calorimeter inspired by Lavoisier's designs but simplified for frontier use. He tests beef tallow, bear fat, and beeswax, notes heat released, writes that nature offers many fuels, each suited to place and season, a parable as much as data. Travelers stop to witness the philosopher of air. A Seneca healer shares lore of burning sweetgrass to cleanse lodges. Priestley listens, eyes alight, and later writes that all cultures intuit the purifying power of fragrant smoke. A German glassblower passing westward repairs cracked jars in return for overnight shelter, leaving behind tales of lightning striking church steeples on the Rhine. Every visitor becomes a footnote, every story a new hypothesis about fire, breath, and spirit. By midsummer Mary's health wavers in muggy heat. Priestley sets moss-cooled basins beside her bed, places sprigs of spearmint in jars sunning on windowsills, hoping freshly minted air will soothe labored breathing. Nights he sits at her bedside, pulse ticking with hers, counting his own breaths to keep fear at bay. 4 in, 6 out, the ancient rhythm. When dawn gilds the shutters, Mary still sleeps, chest calmer, and he whispers silent thanks to leaves and light. Congressional elections ignite partisan tempers. Some Federalist broadsheets paint Priestley as Jacobin incendiary. One issue bears caricature: the chemist pouring seditious gas over America. He laughs softly, then drafts a letter to the editor, measured, wry, inviting the cartoonist to visit and witness experiments that burn only with illumination, never with destruction. Replies are absent, But hostility wanes in face of calm persistence. One golden afternoon he stands on bluff above twin rivers, listening to sycamore leaves clap tiny applause in warm breeze. He thinks how water from two branches mingles mid-current, inseparable thereafter. How so, perhaps, do faith and reason, old world and new, oxygen and living blood. He removes his hat, lets wind thread fingers through graying hair, and fills lungs to their base. Air feels endless here, unstinting. Each inhalation a silent psalm. Late autumn again. Frost etches lattice on laboratory window. By pine knot glow he files papers into leather portfolio labeled experiments and observations on various kinds of air. American series. Introduction thanks river, forest and freedom. He intends to send it to his London publisher, though war across Europe slows ships. Still truth, he writes, must travel even if sails do not. On Christmas Eve village children traipse to the shed, cheeks ruddy, pockets bulging with pine cones to burn beneath inverted jars. Flames sputter resinous perfume. Oxygen collected from snow-cooled manganese makes them leap bright as stars. Outside, sleigh bells ring along snowy street. Inside, wonder crackles. Joseph smiles, eyes reflecting twin candles, one common, one brilliant, dancing side by side. Years slip by gentle as river ice thawing under vernal sun. The chemist walks slower now, yet thoughts roam wide. He ponders whether lightning's nitrogenous aftersmell hints at new air species yet unnamed, whether dense city smog will ever yield to plan ventilation, whether someday great hospitals will pipe oxygen to bedsides the way ironworks pipe steam. In early 1804 chill settles into his bones like uninvited lodger. He writes with trembling hand but mind keen. Let no disagreement quell friendship, let experiment decide. One dawn he asks to see the rescued bowwood jar. His son places it by the window. Light passes through colorless gas unchanged, yet everything it touched, candles, mice, sermons, revolutions, bears its invisible signature. Priestley rests one hand on the glass, closes eyes, breathes once, twice, a third time slower. Smile flickers. In quiet hours that follow, breath becomes featherlight, sighing away at last like mist off river. Family hold vigil. Townsfolk toll bell. News spreads upstream, downstream, across ocean. Some call him father of oxygen, others keeper of phlogistan's last embers. All agree he carried a torch of free thought into new lands. Night cloaks Northumberland, but the laboratory window still glows. Son Joseph Jr. testing river mist for mineral salts by candle. Outside, katydids rasp staccato lullaby. The Susquehanna slides unrushed beneath half-moon's watch. You lie back now, blanketed by that same quiet. Feel each inhale arrive cool as creek water, each exhale drift mild and spent like autumn smoke among corn stubble. No riots blaze, no doctrines clang. Only the river keeps time, the stars keep counsel, and the gentle rhythm of lungs keeps you. Let shoulders melt, jaw loosen. Picture bowwood's jar glowing faint on windowsill, an eternal nightlight for restless minds. Its air is your air. Its calm is gift transmitted across centuries. Breathe slow. Thoughts settle like silt, water clears, and downstream, well downstream, the story glides toward peaceful confluence. For now, float, secure in the vast, invisible canopy of New World sky. Legacy and sleep descent. Morning mist unfurls over the Susquehanna like translucent silk, drifting between willow trunks and across the fields where Joseph Priestley once walked, satchel of notebooks bumping softly at his side. Decades have slipped past since that gentle mind yielded its final breath, yet here in the hush before sunrise, his presence feels as tangible as dew on reed tips. River water murmurs over polished stones, carrying memories blended so thoroughly with current you cannot tell where past ends and present begins. Stand with that river a moment and draw a slow inhalation, quiet, measured, patient. Let coolness fan the back of your throat, expand beneath your ribs, and settle into the roots of your being. Hold it just long enough to notice slight uplift in your shoulders, then release long and smooth, as though gifting used air back to the world that first offered it. In the sleepy township of Northumberland, the homestead still stands, clapboard siding weather-silvered, porch swing creaking under inquisitive sparrows. Inside, Priestley's sons have preserved a corner of the laboratory exactly as he left it, a pine bench modeling the gentle wear of years, retorts that gleam faintly in angled light, and an orderly assembly of stopper jars labeled in slanted ink. Common air, fixed air, nitrous air, and one last jar, its label barely legible. Dephlogisticated air. Time has leached color from paper, yet the gas within remains unchanged, quietly buoyant, waiting for anyone who chooses to peer in and remember how discovery first shimmered. Across the Atlantic, in laboratories lit by hissing Bunsen flames and humming dynamos, Priestley's observations have long since ripened into oxygen therapy wards, high-altitude flight suits, and sealed cabins where astronauts breathe crafted atmospheres while voyaging beyond the pale blue halo of Earth. Each precise percentage of O2 in a scuba tank, every illuminated fingertip clip measuring blood saturation, carries a trace of that candle he once set alight in a bowwood jar. Pause and breathe again, feeling gratitude lengthen the spine, softening every thought into warm amber. Imagine the oxygen in your lungs as kin, direct lineage, to that very sample saved from riot and fire, the same elemental kindness sustaining migrating geese overhead, quiet manatees in coastal coves, and unseen mycelial webs exhaling under forest loam. The world, too, has inhaled Priestley's wider creed, that mind and conscience must roam free. Unitarian chapels he helped nurture now span oceans, each a modest hearth for conversation unshackled by dogma. Meanwhile, the Lunar Society's spirit glides through modern institutes that mingle engineers with poets, glassblowers with geneticists, whispering that cross-pollination is the truest fertilizer of wonder. When school children watch fizzing tablets in a beaker, or when gardeners turn compost to feed tomatoes luscious and red, they reenact experiments first inked in his narrow Leeds attic. They may not know his name, but they breathe his legacy with every curious gasp. Yet numbers and accolades never wholly define a life. Priestley's journals speak as often of kindness as of chemistry, letters gently rebuking prejudice, sermons urging neighbors to widen their circle of care. Even from exile he wrote of forgiving the mob that razed his library, insisting mercy clears the mind like fresh air streaming through a shuttered room. That mercy eddies still, in community clinics distributing inexpensive oxygen concentrators, in activists who campaign for clean, breathable city air, in scholars who translate scientific papers into languages children can understand. Imagine dusk settling now, side-lit by mauve and gold, across every place touched by his influence, the wheat hills of Yorkshire glowing like embers, the lawns of Bowood House humming with crickets, the bustle of Birmingham reduced to soft lamplight behind lace curtains, the wide valley of the Susquehanna cooling beneath swallows skimming for insects. All those landscapes exhale quietly, offering lullaby to anyone attentive enough to listen. Let tension melt from brow and temples. Sense souls grounded, whether against mattress, carpet, or summer grass remembered from childhood. Think of tension as thin smoke curling upward, dispersing harmlessly into high atmosphere. In its place flows Priestley air, clear, restoring, settling about your shoulders like a featherlight shawl. High overhead, countless oxygen atoms drift into rarer heights, where ultraviolet sunlight splits them into single radicals, only to recombine as ozone, a fragile shield Priestley never knew, yet which protects every breath on Earth from harmful flame of stellar radiation. A cosmic echo of his own insight. Elements are not static, but forever cycling, joining, parting, restoring balance in ways big and small. That grand circulatory system of air and life encircles you now, offering each inhale as invitation to serenity. Down the valley, the river bends through sycamore groves where fog still lingers in silver ribbons. An early fisherman eases oars into water, barely rippling the mirrored sky. With each dip, concentric rings widen, glide, fade, circles of calm echoing outward without effort. Your thoughts can move the same way. Release one quiet ripple, then another, until brain chatter smooths to stillness. Perhaps you notice small worry sprouting, an unfinished task, a conversation replaying, some ember of self-critique. Acknowledge it gently, then envision placing it inside a glass jar, your own labeled specimen of spent air. Seal the jar, set it on an inner shelf, and watch as its weight gently drifts away on the tide of deeper breaths. There is room tonight only for ease, curiosity, and trust in cycles older than any calendar. Priestley himself would approve this nightly experiment, to observe your mind's atmosphere as patiently as he observed candles. Notice how each inhale brings subtle brightness, a mental flame lifting, clarifying. Notice how each exhale carries micro-wisps of thought that have done their work. No drama, no judgment. Simply exchange, balanced and beautiful. Stars prick the darkening quilt above, each one an ancient reactor fusing oxygen's elder siblings, carbon, neon, magnesium, then sending starlight across eras to brush your eyelids in quiet invitation. Feel that starlight ripple through closed lashes, a shimmer too faint for wakeful tasks yet perfect for guiding dreams. In the hush after sunset, you share kinship with helium drifting through nebulae and with the faint, satisfying hiss of oxygen feeding a wood stove flame in a frontier cabin. Everything belongs to one breath. A whip-poor will calls from riverbank thickets, 3 patient notes repeating like a watchman's promise that all is well. Let those notes sync with heartbeat. Lube dub rest. Lube dub rest. Each cycle slower than the one before, drawing you down into the soft riverbed of sleep. Somewhere beyond memory's horizon, you may find yourself walking again beside Priestley, along Leeds rooftops hued by dawn, beneath bowers of bowwood where sunlight etched retort glass, across Birmingham's stony lanes just before storm, onto wide Northumberland pastures smelling of cut hay and kettle steam. He will point out small marvels, how bats swirl insect clouds into spirals, how do webs refract nascent light, and you will walk together at a pace that never tires. But for now you need not travel. Simply remain, wait gently supported, wrapped in quiet drawn from centuries of inquiry and years of forgiveness. Warmth pools in palms and arches of feet, tingling lightly before merging into pleasant numbness. Shoulders drift fractionally heavier into mattress. Neck lengthens. Jaw slackens. Air enters through nostrils cool, leaves softer, warmer, changed but still useful, soon to feed moss beneath distant hemlocks. Remember one final image. A small glass jar atop a bowwood sill, air inside clearer than crystal. Outside, a garden breathes. Inside, a future waits. That jar broke open eventually, shared with candles, lungs, theories, engines, and you. Its story has become your breath. Let that thought settle like down feathers across mind's surface, each filament catching stray light until everything glows. Take a concluding inhale, deep but unforced, then sigh it away, trusting gravity to cradle body, trusting night to cradle mind. Thoughts blur to watercolor, outlines softening until shapes dissolve into kind darkness. If a stray spark of wakefulness crackles, bathe it gently in the lavish cool of priestly air. It will dim, soothed, and slip beneath the flow. Without effort, awareness ebbs, and you float in a quiet current threaded with milky starlight, leaves faint rustle, rivers distant hush, and the eternal rhythm of breath. There lies the truest legacy. A world where lungs rise and fall freely, minds meet in curiosity, and even sleep becomes exploration of invisible realms. Drift onward peacefully, beneath the silent benediction of oxygen's endless cycle. Rest, knowing each breath is both inheritance and gift, and that through the simple grace of inhalation and release, you join an unbroken chain of wonder stretching from candlelit attics to boundless night skies.